You could have heard this episode 48 hours early on our Patreon, patreon.com/indieheadspodcast. By joining us for as low as $1 a month, you'll receive episodes early and gain access to our Discord server. All of our upcoming episodes will be up on our Patreon 48 hours before it hits our public podcast feeds. But if you're hearing this via our Patreon feed, we thank you so much for your support. We especially want to thank our Real Ones patrons, including Buchanan, Rob Marino, Grant McSpooky, Barely March, Jenna LaFleur, Dave Grohl, Darian Fisher, RXL RLD, Alec Richmanoff, Melissa Reddig, Lily Mikowski, Tony DeSerafino, Chris Wade, Selectric, David Colbert, Maze Farms, Bex, Georgia Mikowski, Noah Kurtz, Waffle113, Alex Bulovich, Alec Felder, Adam Edwards, Jackson Christ, Elizabeth, John O'Rourke, and Derek Pemberton. To become a real one, consider supporting us with a $5 a month donation every month and get a shout out at the top of the pod. But anyways though, enjoy the episode. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the final episode of the Death Grips Discog Breakdown. I am one of your co-hosts, Matty at Movian Prince on Twitter, and of course joining me is my fellow co-host, Jackie at DJ or at horse underscore jeans. DJ Horse Jeans.
Yes, hello. It's bittersweet. We're at the end of the Death Grips Discog Breakdown. It's been a fun time. I'm sure Gavin is sighing a sigh of relief somewhere right now, just like, thank God they're fucking done talking about Death Grips. And I'm sure some of our listeners too, who maybe weren't tuning into this whole series. But hey, if you were here from day one, if you're a Death Grips fan like us, this is going to be a fun capper on the series, because we were talking about, I would say, the only Death Grips project I could reasonably call underrated. I think pretty much everything else in their discography is either properly rated or perhaps even overrated. And I think Steroids, for whatever reason, I think the reason is just because it's not separated into tracks. I think it's that simple, but we'll get into all that. We got a grab bag of topics of sorts today to talk about, but Steroids is the real headliner because both Matty and I, we fucking love this thing.
Yes, it is. On a good day, if you got me drunk enough, I would probably tell you this was a top 3 Death Grips project. Although I've said I think it's top 5 for me at this point, top 5, top 6. But it's really goddamn good, and it just if you're wondering like why I'm so hard on Year of the Snitch and why I hate that record so much, Steroids is why, because literally a year before they were putting out some of their most brilliant work yet, and then a year later their brains imploded and became broken.
It's so weird the way that there's not much like background to get into, but like the release of this was like, hey, we've got a new album on the way. Here's just something to tide you over. Oh, I don't know. And then they drop easily their best material post Death Grips 2.0, and they're like, oh, but here's the real show. Wait, hold on, sit down. We got flies over here for you. We got shit show. That's why we're frustrated. Is it's not that this band has suddenly lost the things that make them great. Like, even when we get into today, we're going to talk about a couple of the Death Grips and Zach Hill side projects, of which we do not enjoy them as much as we enjoy the Death Grips main output.
Nope.
But like,
nope.
Part of why they're so frustrating is because they are not devoid of interest. They are often very interesting, but they just don't. It doesn't come together in the magic way that Death Grips does. Like, there's something janky and off-putting and kind of unfinished and missing. And a lot of that just has to do with the vocals or lack thereof. Like we've talked about, like the instrumental Zach Hill stuff is just so, it's often so misshapen instrumentally that without any kind of vocal on top of it, like you're really swimming and trying to find your way out of an instrumental that can just be really obnoxious to get through, especially with the new Undo K record. Like, we'll get to that. Yeah. But you're exactly right that like the reason why we are so critical of Year of the Snitch and why you were so hard on Bottomless Pit even is that Steroids is a real continuation of the arc that they were on what's called Powers That Be, because like it really feels like them pushing even further, like, okay, how can we get even faster, even shorter, even more all killer, no filler, breakneck. Like, to me this really feels like the follow-up to Government Plates.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is that unlike Government Plates, where they're like putting all this more emphasis on like the Andy stuff and putting all this more emphasis on like how they're building these songs around MC Ride's voice rather than like in service of it. And this album combines the kind of breakneck, constantly shifting instrumental, uh, free flowing feel of Government Plates and combines that with super duper dense writing. Like, this is easily the most engaged you'll see MC Ride on any Death Grips 2.0 project by far. Like, lyrically, vocally, performance wise, it's just easily the most locked in he's sounded. And he's really like, from basically moment one to the very end of this, rapping. He'll throw a hook in every once in a while, rapping. Like, it is relentless more than any other Death Grips album can be called relentless, which is saying something, because that's like their whole it's their whole MO. But there's, especially when we compare it to these other side projects, as we will do throughout this episode, like, you compare it to the new Undo K from Hot record, which we will talk about on this episode, which is the newest 2021 Zach Hill release. Who are the other members of the band? Is it Nick
I think,
Reinhardt?
yeah, Nick Reinhardt's one of them. I don't know who the other guy is, but I think he's in like another like Southern California experimental rock band. I'm gonna double check this, but I just want to agree with everything you're saying about Steroids, and that
Yeah.
like it's this thing that it's this proof that like Death Grips 2.0 or Death Grips post Powers That Be can still be a great band with like tons of new ideas that they're throwing out there, and
Mm-hmm.
just like the sound design of this record, it's like I've always thought that basically everything from Ginny Death onwards has like pretty muddy mixing, that
Mm-hmm.
just gets progressively muddier. I wouldn't say this has like that muddy mixing. Like, is it does it sound like those first couple records? No, but it sounds fantastic. Like, there's a lot of stuff they're throwing out here and it sounds great, and there's no mud, there's no weird mixing. It's just like it sounds
I
it
think
it
I
just
think
sounds
it's the
amazing.
perfect midpoint between the like super duper HD of Gov Plates and the total mud of Year of the Snitch. Like, it's not as clean as Money Store or Gov Plates, but it's also very legible, even when it's like very instrumentally chaotic. I think this is one of their densest albums, both lyrically and musically, but not in the way that Redacted on the Moon is. Like, that's the other album that this feels the most similar to, but I think that album is like, there are different vibes. This one is obviously, it's MC Ride in a different lyrical mode. Like, he's not as kind of frank and personal and kind of broken the way he is on this one. This is more of the aggressive, aggro, ex-military kind of MC Ride, but it's just,
There'll
it's,
occasionally be lines that cut in, and like a sense of reality like cuts in for
I
a
mean, I
second.
mean, the very beginning of Steroids starts with "my whole life, my whole fucking life," which isn't exactly fun. He's not saying like "my whole life, my whole fucking life's been great, loving it, having a great time,
But what
smiling through it all. Can't believe this is my life." That's MC Riot on moment one of this album.
Oh my god. Let's get into it. So, okay, so real quick, Under K from Hot, Robbie Moncrief is the other guy who I think did some stuff with Zach Hill back in the day.
Oh, that's right.
But
Yeah, I looked him up. Oh, you know who Robbie Moncrief is? I actually figured it out. I looked it up. Do you want to know who he is?
oh god, who is he?
He's the Dirty Projectors engineer. He's
Oh
done
no.
most of Dick Ass's work.
Oh no. I saw the credit on All Music that he was on Lamplit Pros, but
No,
let
but then
me
I expanded the whole thing. Bit Orca, he's on that one
Oh
too.
no. Damn.
He's the Dick Ass right hand man, Matty.
Oh god. Which I'll say this. We were going to record an episode on the Dirty Projector self title. Like, I think myself, Nat, and Eric from Endless Scroll, we were planning on doing that at some point this year. it fell through. But if y'all want that episode, like, let me know, because like I will make that happen again, because I think that self-titled record is like kind of this fascinatingly bad record. That's that like
I will tell you, I am interested in that can of worms being opened, and I have no interest in being the one to make any sense of that. Have fun with that.
Yeah, it's a record that's been rightfully memory hold, but like it's fascinating. But anyways, we're not talking about dirty projectors. We're talking about Death Grips, and we're talking about Steroids, which again, I should reiterate, we skipped over it to do the Euro Snitch episode because we want to end this series off on a high note in terms of like one last great project that we want to talk about, because we don't want to end this on a sour note. We want to talk about like this band sucks now and all this stuff. We want to talk about how just 4 years ago this came out, like 4 years ago, very recently, like just how brilliant this is. So let's get into it with the unofficial name for the track, My Whole Fucking Life. Oh, like right away. Just these.
I was telling Lily, who I think still hasn't listened to this, but I was telling Lily, like, the My Whole Life baseline does for me what Come Up and Get Me is supposed to do for me, but doesn't. Like, the kind of weird stuttering quality of the baseline, like, reminds me a lot of the Come Up and Get Me baseline, but giving it these drums over it and giving the MC Ride screams over it makes it so much more, like, it's one of the craziest ways they've ever, I mean, like, it's just absolutely nuts how breakneck it starts and how immediately it starts doing what it's going to do all album, which is shifting the instrumental ground underneath your feet every fucking 10 seconds. Like, the reason why it's so obvious that they made this all into one mega mix is because the song to song transitions are so good. And then also every individual song has like 5 different ideas in it. So really different. We're going to differentiate out where the 7 sections of this album are, but really it is meant to be experienced as this one free-flowing flow of consciousness, just like fucking panic attack that starts at 11 and somehow manages to get faster and faster and more intense as it goes along, all the way to the very end. Like, every single song figures out a way to take it a step higher, take it a step weirder, take it a step more insane. Like, it's so good.
This just right away puts you in the shit. You're in the shit. Like, every Death Grips intro puts you in the shit, but I think in terms of like just how quickly it throws you in there, like, Get Got throws you in like 20 seconds. You're thrown in like second one with this.
Yeah.
You get a little bit to kind of ease in. You're like, oh, like those bass, but this is just like right away rides like whole fucking life. Whole fucking life.
If your speakers are a little too loud when you put this on, more than any other Death Grips album, you're in risk of like blowing your whole shit out. Like, just getting like cartoon character getting knocked over by the speaker, like, is how aggressive this first song goes. And then right away it already dips into this little interlude thing you're hearing right now that transitions us into the next song in this really, really like atmospheric way. Like, this is so clearly like the extension of Gov Plates, but with more rapping throughout it, and it's just so satisfying. Oh man,
it feels like in some ways this is sort of like an alternative history version of like where they could have gone after Government Plates, where it's like, what if they went in like where they went in this direction instead of where they went on Redacted on the Moon? Because I feel like these two albums, it's like a weird like separated twin situation where it's like, what if you have these twins and you separate them? Like, this is like, okay, let's just take that like that thing where like, okay, like this like perfect sort of like just everything goes back to back, like just perfect transitions essentially, and like this ambient section is very much like, it sounds very much similar to the ambient section on Up My Sleeves, like that little mid section. And it's sort of just like, what if, instead of opening myself up, I kind of kept the usual MC Ride demeanor of like kind of keeping my guard down a little bit, closing myself off as much as I need to, like it's just, and even then it is like, but even with that in mind of it being like, okay, still we're not going to get as frank as we get on Redacted on the Moon or like on GP. Like, that's just not going to happen again with Death Grips, as far as I know. It could happen again. I would hope it happens again. I think like it's some of the most engaging writing that Riot has put out. But
Mm-hmm.
I think by entering at least just partially in that mode where you have those little
Yeah.
bits where like that frankness comes out again, it just makes for the most engaging writing. And obviously the fact that like just Riot is on his fucking bullshit. We're like, you're the snitch, like he doesn't have much to work with, so I can't blame him per se. But this is just like he's working with just like some of the best stuff that Zach and Andy have come up with instrumentally here, which is just insane thing about just like a year before. It's just like, oh, let's make this project where like we're kind of ripping it ourselves off, and here's like, okay, like let's get back into that mode of originality. Like let's really dive in here. It's just incredible. Like this first little bit, like it gets you right in the shit right away, and then
The
you're
first
already
of
like,
the first of many great blow your brains out transitions on this album. It's just this whole second song is maybe my favorite song on the album because listen, like 10 seconds into it now immediately we're already getting another beat switch and we're gonna get like 4 more of the like this the rapping that he does on here, like the fast double time stuff, like he sounds like fucking Twista on this song, and it's so cool. Like, and over these like reversing and these bassy synths, it's just so fucking weird. And this song like has 4 different beat switches, and it doesn't arrive at the chorus, the ostensible chorus to the song until like 4 minutes into it, and so that's what makes this special is it's not just like, oh, we're gonna have 7 tracks that flow into each other really well. Like these tracks are so interesting in their structure in the micro, and then in the macro the way that those fit together, it just creates this experience that can't be identified in the way you think of like a standard album. You have to pick out like individual moments and snippets and sections because that's what it's existing in. It's like music that exists moment to moment to moment and is constantly mutating.
yeah, like this section is incredible. Like the again the verse, this bitch still praying to the sun, this bitch more ate up than my lunch,
So
this
good.
bitch make me take my time, making for change they're gonna come, bitch always been asked out, kiss your black ass on the mouth, shit had bitch, that bitch is broke, said broke bitch, I'm on that dope. And then yeah, the double time stuff, like the beginning section that sounds like he's like rapping in the Black Lodge language, where it's like speaking, where he's just essentially like repeating, like basically rapping in reverse and then just spinning that back. It's incredible.
The first verse is like, it sounds like they slowed down the instrumental and had MC Ride rap over it and then sped it up so that MC Ride's vocals were really fast. But then like when he gets to the actual double time flow, he's not sped up at all. That's just him rapping Kool-Aid bitch, I'm blazing fast. And then this part,
section,
yeah, no, Jesus Christ.
The kick drum stuff that Zach is, holy shit.
Yeah, this is instrumentally my favorite part of the album is when it starts escalating up like this with the siren speakers and the kick drums. Yeah, it's unfucking believable.
Oh god, the synth stuff here sounds so nasty. Like, oh god, like, oh my god, it's so good. It's so good. Like, it's hard to talk about this record without just being like it's hard to articulate because it's just like listen to it. It's good. Like,
and it also flies by so fast that like the moment we start talking about one thing, like the instrumental is gonna get way ahead of us in 20 seconds.
Yeah. Cool long as I don't move my tongue. Cool long as I don't bite my tongue.
And then now 3 minutes into the song, we're gonna get a great hook. The shit like this, Rob, when you skin that thick, rights past it, I've been through it. It's so good.
Yeah, like it's like Ride's back. Like after Bottomless Pit, we're like, we disagree, but like I feel like Ride's not fully engaged on that project. This like, it's like it's like, oh shit, he's back. Like, you know, it wasn't gone very long, mind you, but it's just like, all right, he's back on his, like, he's back 100, 1000%. I used to give a fuck. Like he's back in that mode, and it's so good.
And I think you've identified well that it's like, it isn't the guard down version that we saw on like Redacted on the Moon, but it's also not the like layered in 5 layers of irony mode that we see him on. Oh, we should pause before we get into this next one.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like it's this good balance where I think early on, one of the things I was so into Death Grips that I think they've gotten so bad at, like especially in Year of the Snitch, is like the kind of storytelling like in movies where instead of telling you like here is our world and we're gonna world build by having like a character do like expositional like dialogue, like instead the really great movies are the worlds that can like they can tell you so much about the world that you're existing in through tiny little details, and like you feel like you're getting a sliver of something that is much larger and more expansive. And that's what MC Ride was doing, especially on Ex-Military and the Money Store. Like he was doing this kind of world building where you're not never getting a clear picture of like this is a concept album and this all takes place in the year blah 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 blah, and there are these characters. He doesn't give you any of that. He gives you these brief flashes and glimpses through this mental prism that he's delivering it all through, that makes everything feel jumbled and chaotic, and it really puts you in the mindset of the character, and it really puts you in the world in a way that is different than like the kind of world building you have on like say a 21 Pilots album, where like people are like, oh, there's all this lore and this character is the voice of this album and this like all that. That's not what Death Grips is. It's a very different kind of thing where you think about the stuff on like Hacker and some of the lyrics on this album and some of the lyrics on Bottomless Pit, like where it's just all depicting this gross seedy underbelly world that they're living in. And I think they become so up their own ass and so obsessed with themselves that they kind of lose touch with that. Because what happens is after Redacted on the Moon, they're like, okay, we want to avoid the personal, but they lose sight of where they're really good, which is this gray area between the personal and the fictional, where you create like this world that you get lost in, but there's also these glimpses of MC Ride the person in there. Like obviously, even though he's not putting his guard down on this album, you get lots of glimpses of kind of this fractured, fucked up mental state. I mean, it's Death Grips. Like, what do you expect? But like,
And then next series, like Little Richard got triggered. Oh no. Which by the way, we mentioned the last episode, which we recorded like I think about 2 weeks ago at this point. When we're recording this, on Tuesday, June 15th. So this is going out like probably like in like 6 days when we're recording this. We the Death Grips every song ranked article, it is going to happen after we do our Q2 favorites. It's what's next on the list. It's probably gonna be like a multi-week thing. We're just every week we're sort of maybe like 4 or 5 parts where we're just going 25 every week. I don't know. It depends on what Substack's limit ends up being on how much we can do a week. But yeah, Little Richard, I can just tell you right off the bat, Little Richard's probably going to be the worst. It's probably going to be bottom of the list. I feel like I can confidently say that. Like that's going to be bottom of the list, unfortunately, folks. Like
100%.
But anyways, back to Steroids. This section right now, again, you have this crazy drum stuff that Zach's doing that very much feels in line with what's going on in Redacted on the Moon, and then this stuff coming up. Hang on, just like let's do this. Like, oh shit, hear that snare coming in? Like, okay, something's happening. Yeah, there's like crazy hook with like about bald head girls, and you're like, what is going on? Oh, hang on. Oh, dude. Ah.
Yeah, this song is. I think it's definitely the most like, oh shit, they're on some wholly new. Like this was the moment when you're listening to it for the first time, you're like, oh, this is different. This is really feels like the ultimate like conclusion of kind of the cyberpunk version of Death Grips. Kind of like a little bit of what they're doing on I Break Mirrors and stuff like that, but like having this stuff that feels very rock oriented and kind of this thumping beat to it, but it's also so clearly like made up of electronics. Like there's no guitars at all on the song. It's just all synthesizers, but it kind of has like the chugging feeling of like a hardcore punk song. And oh my god, when we get to the fucking beat switch that happens with the like wobbly synths where all the beats comes out, that's the part where my brain just goes like shuts off like a light. Oh my god.
Also, yeah, this little bridge section with like what sounds basically like a voice coming out of like a casino machine, like I've never been to a casino. What's it called? Like when you pull the lever,
The
like,
slot machine.
it's like you're pulling a slot machine, like that's the noise that comes out. Like basically this song, this like entire like Steroids, it feels like I feel like I'm Howard Ratner in a casino right now. Like Howard Ratner on a binge at a casino.
On a bad fucking trip. This is
on a bad trip.
I really like obviously the lyrics, like the chorus is great. I really love the part in verse 1 where it goes into the robot voice, the awakens your fantasy, bathing you like Bathory, because I didn't know what that meant, and then I looked it up, and it turns out it's a reference to a Hungarian woman named Elizabeth Bathory, who was a famous serial killer who is alleged to have murdered as many as 650 people and is perhaps the most prolific female murderer in history. And supposedly she regularly bathed in the blood of virgins, and so that's what that's a reference to, and is really a good example of like MC Wright is very kind of literary, but he doesn't usually lean on stuff like that. And if he makes you look something up, it's because it's cool. It's because he wants you to look up and learn something cool, and that's a great example of it. This part is fucking incredible. The instrumental is I don't know how Zach Hill's brain works. In so many ways, I don't know how Zach Hill's brain works.
Which we're gonna really get into when we discuss most of the side project, which are mostly his side projects. But God, the like ride, like it's some of his best flows. Like he's going, like, you know, ride, like generally, like there's a lot of stuff Death Grips where he has like a really fast flow. This is like holy shit. He's just speed running through this shit, and it sounds incredible. Because like for the most part, like, you know, quote unquote fast rap has gotten a bad reputation.
Yeah.
But like Ride was like, hey, like no, like if you do it right, you can really like. There's a certain intensity to it that like cannot be matched by any other music. Exactly. Also, this Me and My Doppelganger have a system where he's got this like this pitch where like, hey, turns out you can actually pitch shift MC Ride and make it work and sound really good and fit thematically with the song, you know.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's so clever the way like it's a doubling of his voice where there's two different pitches laid on top of each other, and it's so great with the lyrics because it evokes like two little aliens that are inside MC Ride piloting him that have these different two voices. Like it's so clever and creative, and in general, like that's what I'm talking about, like this kind of like almost sci-fi world building that this album has that is so much more evocative and interesting than kind of when they're just trying to be little shitheel provocative tools.
Yeah. And then this is like probably the only part of the like of Steroids where like there's like a pretty clear transition between songs, which is this next part. Get these live drums kick in, you're like, you know,
oh, maybe we're going into something live or whatever, and then all of a sudden you get these vocals that the first time I heard them I was like, Young Lean, is that you? But then it goes right into maybe the best they've done post Money Store at doing Money Store again, is what I think about this song.
Yeah, like the thing with Bottomless Pit is that everyone, here's the thing, I guess I get like why everyone's like, oh, it's Money Store, because even I said that line for a while, but I feel like Bottomless Pit is like, it's this amalgamation of like what people think Death Grips is in some ways. It's sort of like, it's like if you fed every Death Grips song to an AI, like Bottomless Pit is like probably what it would come up with. Actually, no, that's Year of the Snitch. That's Year of the Snitch.
No, neither of those. Undo K from Hot is what an algorithm that listens to Death Grips sounds like. Year of the Snitch sounds like what if a goblin heard Death Grips and reinterpreted it. Nothing about that is like the logical like interpretation of Death Grips. Everything about Year of the Snitch is weird as shit, for better and worse. But this song is really great. I think the hook of it is really, really, really great. I think the synth work that, like, this song doesn't really have a lot of like super duper hard hitting drums, but that synth line is so good and his vocal is so fucking good. I really love the hook on this is one of my favorite like lyrical moments. The "you're sleeping on a gold mine," that moment is so good vocally, but I also think it's a really great lyric in terms of the theme of like, it's not like the internet has democratized anything in a real kind of tangible way. All that's happened is there's just like more opportunities for you to go on the chutes and ladders of life and like skip past people. And so this you're sleeping on a gold mine, don't be frightened by skeptics thing is like it feels so Bitcoin to me, but like in a kind of clever way. You know what I mean? Like it's all about like all of these people trying to find their quick fix, and also all these people afraid of sleeping on a gold mine. All these people afraid of missing out on the opportunity to get this like golden ticket. And how that feels so like internet age, and how you're sleeping on a gold mine is this thing that he's yelling like with terror in his voice.
Like, oh god, just it's so, oh god.
Pathway. How read this verse right here. Tone of our voices means our locations are run away. Before all your destinations, I'll be on display. I'm fucking on your schedule. Explanations in delay. Pathway, enchanted encounter. Feed that hoe a chainsaw. Burned up at myself. Back to the floor. Moment as I do. Bustle with such a bore. Pull this way. Run your vehicles because you know it's cool. Put that fist on my pedestal till I stroke the core.
What is he saying? But also, what he's saying is so provocative. It's like it's just one of the things. Like, I can't even begin to comprehend what it all means. But just you feel it in your bones. You go, okay, I know what he's. I can't tell you what he's saying.
And more than any other album, it feels that way, because not only is this the fastest, most breakneck Death Grips album, but he never stops rapping for a second of it. And so unlike Redacted on the Moon, where you've got these instrumental passages and you've got certain like key phrases that are repeated over and over again, this feels like not only does it not hold on to an instrumental idea for longer than a second, there are almost no repeated hooks, like only really Bald Head Girl and come and go wherever, and come and go whenever to wherever you please is the line. But those are like the only two real like hooks on the song that repeat as a refrain, besides the next one you get sick like I guess is a hook. But in general, like this is just like keep going, keep rapping, MC Ride just not stopping for 1 second. And I love this transition right here, the high right into that nasty drum fill, and the way that this feels similar to Bald Head Girl. It's got this like kind of breakneck hardcore punk feel to it, but I just love this feels like what Shit Show should have been, like if executed correctly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like this track especially makes me feel like the white Andy Morin, like when he's doing live and he's just like jerking his head just like dangerously. You're gonna get like you're gonna pull a muscle, Andy, like doing this. I have to wonder if Andy's ever pulled a muscle like doing like his little jerk like neck things that he does when he's playing live. But no, this part is completely sick. Like Zach Hill instrumental, just like crazy stuff, and the sick like oh my god.
And these verses are so dense.
Yeah, like what the fuck is he talking about?
Counter-Strike Red Bambata on those tears. Get by Stampede off billions.
Stagnant Eye, Spring Rupture, drop off here, said my deadbeat. And also this section where it's like, yeah, this little like there's so many interesting sound design stuff happening here. Like there's like great like synth choices and samples being thrown out there, and obviously like Zach's drumming being like the best drumming he's done in like possibly ever in Death Grips, where he's like, hey, you remember when I was in that band Hella and I did these like crazy drum fills and whatnot? Yeah, let me remind y'all that like I can still do that within the context of Death Grips if I want to.
I also think the last verse on this is one of the most clear lyrical moments where I'm like, okay, I know what he's talking about here. Hooded figure, exploit your demons, cast profit, go to buy it, try can't knock it. Bet a bitch forward this market, better get numbered. Your profit, the offer day, you're numbered. Try to flee, but you can't leave. You get paid to suffer. Oh my god,
isn't that not just the situation we're in right now? Like I was like, yeah, you are hostage to this situation.
You are profit. You get paid to stuff, and I also think it's such a perfect encapsulation of like something you hear a lot with athletes and entertainers, particularly black athletes and entertainers, is like why are you complaining? You get paid millions of dollars, but you don't. Those people completely discredit how even in a system that pays you insanely well, like someone like Death Grips. I mean, obviously Death Grips is not making anywhere near basketball player money, but you know what I mean. Like it's like, oh, to someone from the outside, it's like you're living the quote unquote dream and you have everything you ever want, but you only do that by completely subsuming yourself to this system that turns you into a number and turns you into a profit and makes you suffer and makes you feel paranoid and disconnected from the real world in the way that we saw back on like the no love deep web era, the way that like becoming successful made their lives even more miserable and didn't pull them out of the poverty they were in really. And so the you get paid to suffer line is it's like you get paid but you're suffering, like you're trapped here, and how that is the thing that they are kind of running from at all times. And
Yeah.
that moment, the way that transitions right into Black Body, which is just one of the most
This drums.
This song instrumentally, I think more than any feels like the furthest extreme of the electronic experimentations of Death Grips, where like the first half is this weird haunted string sample thing with these footwork drums, and it's so like ghost castle mode, but then the second half of the instrumental just revs up into this like horrific metal machine thing, and these really like blown out distorted vocals and the pitch shifting that's going to come in on the second half of the song. It's just one of the most menacing vibes of any Death Grip song instrumentally. Once this like spaceship synth powers up right here, oh my god.
It's definitely, and also like it's the most frank Ride has been on a Death Grip song since on GP, of just like,
yeah,
where like, you know, obviously the high section leading into this, where it's just like, hey, if you didn't get it the first, like you didn't get it in this last verse, let me make it a bit more clear of like,
yeah,
you know, of, and like the line, like even myself one time, it's just one of those lines, it's just like one of those imagery that just like stands out to you, and it's like hard to just figure out why exactly it hits you so hard, but it's just like not really getting a chance to know who you really are and be like, hey, maybe one time I did get to meet who I really am. You know, like being in this system, you don't really get to be who the real you are. And it also makes you lead to think that this is a mostly serious discussion on this song, or like mostly serious, but also it makes you think like ask myself, like, is MC Ride an anarcho-primitivist? Like, I feel like if you had to like put Ride's, it's like there is like the most known anarcho-primitivist that I know is the drummer from Fall Out Boy. Who has a girl,
yeah,
who has like a young girlfriend that's like famous on TikTok, and like occasionally I'll be on TikTok and I'll see on my feed like, wait, hang on a second, that's the guy from Fall Out Boy. Like, what are you doing here?
That is so weird.
Oh, but yeah, this part where you have like the Black Body and like these like pitch shifted stuff, all this chaos being thrown in the mix, you know, like just you can't even comprehend like what's going on and like what's happening.
Yeah, and the lyrics underneath are so like, you were absolutely right that this is definitely the most lyrically frank moment of the album. That last section we just heard, nothing matters anymore. You gotta pause the.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with Steroids is that like it's hard to like pause in certain sections because you just want to hear it all the way through. It's tough.
I do, but I really like the lyrics of that last section where he says, "Nothing matters anymore. You can't see the Kraken climbing out of the bullshit that exists from the mouth. You can't get out of debt. Just learn to keep on stabbing in the heart with a fucking knife. You drop it before you can catch it. Do you see what's taxing? All life's moment before the grave. You're only optimally the passenger, a slave. From the middle finger, open the sewers up before you drop this ring. Reeve the culture hiding behind this life. Kill the pain." Like, what the fuck? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, even more so than a lot of this to me perfectly just like strikes the right balance between the I don't know what the fuck you're talking about MC Ride and the I feel exactly what you're talking about deep in my soul MC Ride. Like those two reactions, this one is the most of both of them at the same time. Like I simultaneously don't even know where to fucking start about what this album is trying to get at conceptually, and also like I feel there are so many moments in this album that I just like feel in my chest. And then like you were talking about, like you get that moment and you're like, okay, well clearly Black Body, even though it starts ratcheting up the intensity toward the end of it, it's kind of one of the more reflective moments on the album, one of the more melancholy moments on the album, one of the kind of darker, and then you're like, all right, I wonder what's coming after this. And what comes after this is like someone took whatever I want, fuck who's watching, and put turbo mode on it. This last song is
MC Ride is Paul Walker in Too Fast, Too Furious, and he has pressed the double NOS buttons on his car. We're shifting into turbo mode.
This is, I believe, the track title I've heard for this one is Panel Movement, which I think comes from the "And I Move with It" chorus.
Mm-hmm, which, God, like, there's so much. It's the rest of this episode after this basically is going to be just like us trying to figure out like what the fuck is wrong with Zach Hill's brain at this point, like what has invaded his brain and made him so bad. But this is just like that last like flicker of brilliance from Zach Hill being like I can combine my crazy technical skills into great songwriting with like the right group of people, the right engineering, and sort of just the right timing of just like, okay, like all this stuff happening in my brain lines up perfectly in this very moment. And this part especially is just like completely insane. Like crazy drumming and like Ride is completely off grid at this point.
The drumming on this hook right here especially is when I'm like, oh my god, Zach has transcended drumming as an art form entirely. Like the way that this song is constantly hurtling forward but then constantly switching up and having the time and doubling the time and taking all these different left turns, and it'll slow down and then go back up to full speed again immediately.
Just like, oh god, just fast and just.
And then this part right here. This flow is really great. Question with this friend. This is the one, I said it earlier, but I think this is the one where his vocals are sped up a little bit. Like on that first verse, I think they probably slowed down the instrumental and had him. I also love this hook, the "All I See Is Sycophant" hook, because we hear it 2 or 3 times during the song, all under different instrumental moments. So like it keeps transforming how you hear that.
It's also just like the most obscured he sounds in the song. Like, there's all these like crazy vocal effects, and then this part,
which feels like the real sequel to Whatever I Want, like with the slowed down moments.
Mm-hmm. It's like the slow-mo drug of dread is like kicked in for this brief section of the song, and oh my god, do you all hear these drums? Like, what the fuck is Zach Hill doing? Like, what? It's insane. It's like I listen to this, I'm just like, this is there's some times where I'm so hyped, I'm like, yeah, no, this is the best Death Grips project. I don't give a shit. Do you hear what they're doing here? Like, they're like, Zach Hill is taking this crazy stuff, and Ride is able to. It's some of the most out there stuff that Zach Hill has done yet, but Ride is able to perfectly ground it, even when he's like spouting off complete nonsense, because he's just that engaging of a performer. Where like you may not understand exactly what he's saying, but just you kind of feel it, you know. It's like you can't parse it per se, but you know that there's this deep feeling inside. You're like, okay, like I don't know what he's saying, but like it's making me feel something. It's making me want to keep listening to this and keep deciphering like with this. It's like, you know, 4 years later, I still cannot decipher most of this record, and that's why I love it, because it's like every time I go back, it's just like on a surface level, just super exciting. Just like if you want like a quick bite size, you know, bit of like what makes Death Grips great, this is that. And then, but also when you dig in, it's some of this most dense work yet lyrically, where there's just like you can't comprehend what the hell he's talking about. Like it's just sort of like it's simultaneously like a technical showcase, but also like it's so esoteric and oh my god, it's some of his best work. It's the last time that MC Ride is like fully on one for a Death Grips album, and I hope that the years away that they've not been making records, I do hope that it's just like it is for like good reason and for like okay, just to re-energize those creative spirits, you know.
And that
But
the last lyrics that it ends on, that verse 2 before the last hook, where he says, "What can I say? Fuck what you say. You can ask around if you think I'm frontin'. Never been that much, but I got here first. Get the fuck out, bitch, while I do my work." It's just what a mic drop to end the album on. And then the way it ends, like with that weird synth thing, it's just so breathless and so breakneck the whole time that when you get to that moment, I'm always like, wait, it's done, it's over, 22 minutes, well, what like you feel like you're in like a daze, like you just like you just had sex and all of a sudden you're just like waking up. Like what happened, where am I, what day is it, hour is it, like you just feel totally like in a fog when you finish this album. And if you
yeah.
accidentally leave it on like repeat, you get thrown right back into the fucking rinse cycle again with this album the way it starts. Like if you choose to run this back after that quick 22 minutes, like you get thrown right back into the shit of it. And it really does feel more than any other Death Grips album like a roller coaster ride, like this
Mhm.
thing that you board it and you just ride it for 22 minutes. And I think that that's why they did it as a mega mix, not only because they want all of the transitions and things to be appreciated, but they also really want you to be just like fully locked into this thing from start to finish.
Mhm. Just like fully, just like again, you don't pick apart songs. Like you need to be, and not even getting stuff to official song titles. Even it's just like you need to be fully
Yeah,
engaged for this.
exactly.
It's amazing. But that is Steroids, which is fucking amazing. And if you somehow have not listened to it, go listen to it. It's one of the best Death Grips projects, and it's that glimmer of hope that like, hey, like they could still be great if they want to. They just it's just but now it's like we're at the longest period by like double in terms of between Death Grips projects, because the only thing that we got after Year of the Snitch was Gmail and the Restraining Orders, which I think I mentioned on the Bottomless Pit episode, maybe. If not, this was something that they played like during their like before shows during the Ginny Death tour, and it only got officially released after I think it was like an NTS Warp celebration, and I think Warp did like some distribution for Death Grips for like some of their, I think like Powers That Be was distributed by Warp in like Europe and the UK and whatnot. And and also Warp is a legendary label, and Death Grips are essentially an electronic band working within that canon, and you got to appreciate a label like Warp for
Yeah.
shaping so much of that canon. And so they for this little NTS radio Warp celebration, they gifted them this 28-minute long experimental uh song slash EP that uh which I'll just play it because even years later, like I legitimately, I'm only gonna play a little bit of it because I think it is like when people go, oh, Death Grips is experimental. It's like, yeah, they are experimental, but this is like pure experimental. Like you can barely mesh together what this is. Like this is a like explosion to your senses. Like try to comprehend this. You're not going to.
Whatever rails that they put on their music and limitations, they've taken them fully off here. It's definitely, yeah, like even more so than the instrumental EPs like Fashion Week and Interview, which those songs are kind of formless, but a lot of them are feel like instrumental songs without vocal parts over them. While this just feels like intentional like sound collage that just is constantly mutating. And like it's really cool as like a, like you're saying, like a sensory art experience. But it is the only Death Grips thing that feels like okay, they're fully in conceptual art piece mode. Like this is not I mean, the only other thing I can compare this to is I think technically one of the B-sides to Steroids is that like electronic drum solo dub mix or whatever it's called, which is
Mhm.
literally just 12 fucking minutes of Zach going bloopity bloop 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 on a V drum kit, and it's kind of cool, but like I think Gmail is more interesting than that. I think it's really bizarre and cool, and it is cool to hear them like be like, okay, what if we completely abandoned the kind of pop instincts, because even on Steroids, which is like one of their most assaultive listenings like experiences ever, there are all those hooks that are just buried in that onslaught that just like sneak up on you. And I think this is them going like, let's fully burn down the house and see how experimental and formless we can get. And it's cool. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, like I actually like I think people were mad that I ranked this above You're the Stitch in my Paste article, and it's just like I don't know, because it actually puts out some pretty interesting ideas and stuff they were exploring at the time. Like it's cool to hear like the live drums kind of mixed in with like some like V drum stuff, where it seems like they similar to like how they treated Bjork's voice on Redacted on the Moon, where it's sort of like putting some of these ride things in there and just it's this interesting like kind of jam mixture of like a jam session and sound collage. I think it's actually really cool and it's a surprisingly engaging listen. Like I think this project is like legitimately super underrated. And here's the thing, at this point when it comes to like Zach Hill experimentation bullshit, I can't tolerate it at this point. But this is actually kind of cool. And I think obviously having Ride's voice still kind of be a big part of it helps, even if it's complete gibberish and
it,
nonsense
it,
and you
it
can't understand
it's
anything.
so important. Like I really realize that like when we're gonna get into the Undo K from Hot record now, like that record and a lot of the ILY's records and a lot of the side project records is just so clear. Like it's not just that you need a vocalist, it's you need MC fucking Ride, because he is one of the only voices in the world that has the heft and the force, and he has the raw power that he can push out with his diaphragm that cuts through the cacophony. Because otherwise, like if you have someone trying to do more traditional singing, or having someone do screams that are more metal traditional screams, or any like you're just setting yourself up for disaster, because you're going to get completely swallowed by what you're trying to do underneath it instrumentally. And that's one of the superpowers that MC Ride has, that's very similar to like DMX or like Rick Ross, where it's like you can't have an instrumental that's too big for Rick Ross, because his voice is so big that he can cut through it, and he never gets like outshined by the giant completely like ridiculous instrumentals that he'll get put over. And there's a similar thing with MC Ride, where it's like his ability to like breathe fire and sort of cut through metal the way he does is what makes Death Grips so weirdly listenable for how genuinely experimental they can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you see other vocalists try to do that over Zach Hill, instrumentals, including Zach Hill himself, you really see like, oh, I get why they need him.
Yeah. And right now we're playing that like electronic drum solo dub mix, which is like it's essentially like warm up music, like they played this before their like 2017 tour. And like, it's fine as sort of like kind of getting the listener in the headspace at a live show, like okay, like kind of assaulting you early on before like okay, like let's bring you back in,
It gets kind of cool around like 9 minutes or whatever, but I also think that the fact that it takes that long to get interesting is kind of
It's clearly trying to like do, there's a ton of these Zach Hill videos out there where he's like doing.
it's like Zach Hill ambient music is what sort of like it's the closest to ambient music he could ever make.
Yeah. And it's clear that like when he, this is sort of, basically the V drum kit phase with Zach Hill has produced again the best Death Grips album and also some of the worst Death Grips albums. But this is like, for what this is fine. It's essentially just sort of like a recorded like practice and sort of trying out different things. And like for what this is as like just like a experiment, that we kind of put out for the live shows. it's fine. Like I don't think this is too bad. But again, I feel like with these sort of like jam sort of practice things, it sounds much better live because I feel like live you really do feel when he's punching those drums. Like there's a much more visceralness that's just kind of missing from something like this. Um, but in terms of Death Grips music, I that's everything. We've covered all the Death Grips music out there as far as I can tell. We may have missed some obscure stuff. Like we maybe missed like No Hands Fi, which we'll talk about in the article, I think. And I think there's Death Davis, which was a this original version of Hacker that was supposed to be on government was supposed to be on ex-military before it was repurposed for the money store. But now we are going to get into the side projects that were going on while Death Grips was happening. And for the most part, from 2011 to 2015, pretty much nothing really. There was a Hell album that came out a little bit after ex-military, although again, to call that a side project at the time, Hella was Zach Hill's main project, and Death Grips was a side project before. Clearly, after ex-military took off, and after sort of Zach Hill was already like, this is the music I really want to focus on and make. Like Death Grips was the main project from ex-military going forward. So Hella Up and Trip, it's good Tripper. It's pretty good. It's not my favorite work from Hella, but I think it's a pretty good album, and I kind of hope that one day we get another Hella album at some point. But the main there was also this the Drumgasm, which let me see if I can find it on Spotify real quick, which was a super group album between Janet Weiss, now formerly of Sleater Kinney, Zach Hill, and Cameron. Oh God, who is the Cameron? I want to say it's like Pearl Jam's drummer or something like that. Let me
It's
make
Matt
sure.
Cameron,
Matt Cameron
who
of
is Pearl Jam and Soundgarden fame.
Yeah. And so this was just a little fun instrumental improvisation thing. It's all drums. it's all drums, and it's just Zach and Janet and Matt.
Oops, all drums.
Yeah. Which that's a
I
drum
also
gasm, folks.
this reminded me the other night I listened to for the first time I believe it's called Necromancer, which is a solo Zach Hill album from 2014, I want to
Actually, no,
say.
I did look it up afterwards after you sent it to me. I believe it was actually on Astrological Straits, which I want to say was either the first or second Zach Hill solo album. And it was like a super long outro track that wasn't on like the physical releases, and just some
Gotcha.
fan uploaded. Let me double check just to make sure. Uh,
But yeah, it's out there on YouTube if you just look up Zach. Yeah, it's from Astrological
yeah,
Straits. Yeah, so released in 2008. But if you go look it up on YouTube, it's out there, and yeah, it's basically a 32-minute long post jazz song with Zach Hill drumming on it, and it's very very cool, I think.
yeah. Again, some of the early Zach Hill solo stuff, like Face Tat, is like kind of an underrated album. It's weird that his music like basically after Death Grip started, just like how different it is, either how different or just how uninspired it feels. Because you listen to something like Face Tat, like I'm gonna play the Primitives talk real quick. There's some cool stuff happening on this Face Tat record, and Zach Hill as a vocalist isn't too bad on this. I think he's using his voice in a good way, where it's much more hidden in the background, and it's more about the drums and sort of the kind of electronic elements he's sort of playing with. And obviously,
Yeah.
like this is when Andy Moore kind of comes into play with Zach Hill, and it basically becomes his go-to engineer. And it's clear you listen to Face Tat, you kind of you can figure out how you go from this to ex-military. But Face Tat, pretty cool album. I have not listened to Astrological Straits, and I definitely need to. But a little bit after Ginny Death comes out, let's move up in a chronological for legitimate, where Drumgasm just sort of this fun thing that he did with Matt Cameron and Janet Wise, and sort of this fun experiment, doing your friends. We think it's the ILYs, which was started by Zach and Andy around the time they were doing Ginny Death, and basically the powers that be, and sort of they surprise dropped an album just a few months after Ginny Death called "I've Always Been Good at True Love," which is which I'll play a couple tracks off it briefly. It's a
Definitely the best of the three ILYs albums,
absolutely.
and definitely not terrible. And a lot of tracks on here, specifically Articulate, which is my favorite one, make me really wish I could have heard what it would sound like if Andy and Zach made a kind of indie rock album with a lead singer who is good. That's the thing, is that
Yeah.
even on this album where a couple of these songs I'm like, okay, Articulate does this really cool like slowcore thing and has a pretty good hook to it, but even in the moments that are really working instrumentally, I think Zach just gives not a whole lot as a lead vocalist.
Mm-hmm. Like, and it's weird. Basically, these ILY's albums are very like kind of traditional garage rock. Like, you don't really have any crazy, that standard Zach Hill crazy drumming. Like, it's pretty
They're
standard.
shockingly straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah, it's clear that they were kind of tapping in something with Jenny Death, and they sort of wanted to like go bare bones and sort of back to basics. It's like a classic garage rock band. And I here's the thing, for this one album, they tap into it. It's a decent record. Like, I don't think it's bad. Vocals can leave a little bit to be desired, but they're throwing some good ideas out here. There's some good songwriting going on.
Articulate makes me really, really wish we heard a mainline Death Grips song that went full on shoegaze like that song does. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the riffs on here are my favorite part for sure.
Yeah, and my favorite song on the record is probably the outro, which is All She Does Is Kill Shit, where like you have a kind of nice chugging riff, and like Zach's vocals actually kind of work on the song. Kill shit. Where like the vocals on this were so good that people thought it was MC Ride. Like, that was the theory at the time, but it's clearly not Ride. Like,
yeah, it's just Zach doing a Ride flow,
pretty much. And it sounds like this song is good. I like the organs. Like, it's a fun outro, and for a fairly decent garage rock record. But again, it's one where it's like, if it wasn't attached to Death Grips, no one would really care about this. But it's like, okay, it's fine. But then you get to the next record, which is Scum with Boundaries, where I listened to it again today, and it's not that bad. It's not terrible, but it's really fucking. It's very like, whereas like True Love is like, okay, it's a standard garage rock record, but like it's got some engaging songwriting. This is just like where they're trying to add some of the more like electronic elements that they were really going in with Death Grips, but like Zach's vocals are bad, and like the songwriting just is not very good. It's sort of like, we're like, with like, if we're comparing these to the albums they came out with at the time, where this is sort of like came out around the time of Bottomless Pit, sort of in that musical mode where it's like more electronic stuff and sort of like kind of like regurgitating and sort of all this stuff. This just, it doesn't do anything for me. It's very, very boring.
I mean, we've come a long way from if you need a lift, you can sit between the back seat and my dick. Like, great, hilarious things too. I'm gonna have sex. Why does it suck on me? Why does it suck on me?
Oh God, yeah. Oh God. I don't even want to.
A pussy was my hoodie, Maddie. You didn't like that line? You didn't like the line, a pussy was my hoodie?
He can't sell, Zach Hill just can't sell it. Like, he just can't sell those lines at all. Like, I don't, like when he says this pussy was my hoodie, like, I don't believe you, Zach. Like, buddy, I've seen your most recent press photo. You're like, there's, again, no one's trying to put the pussy to the face, man. Like, I'm sorry. But no. And then Scum with Boundaries, it's, again, diminishing returns from the last ILY's record, and then you have the diminishing returns of the diminishing returns, which is Bodyguard, which is the next record they did, which like there's some decent songs. Like, I think like Wash My Hand Shorty, it's kind of fun. Like, I don't hate it. It's very basic, and it even though it's only 3 minutes long, it does not justify the length at all. It should maybe be a minute and a half at most. Although interesting enough, this record was co-released by Castleface Records, which is the record label owned by John Dwyer of OCs.
Huh.
So this was the first time they were kind of going at it, with like a actually like
Org
fairly
Org Core Zach Hill.
Orcore Zach Hill. This is that is what the IOWise is. It's Orcore Zach Hill. But whereas like OCs is like really fast paced at times and like, there's a lot of energy. These IOWise records just have no energy whatsoever. Like the musical the things that make Zach Hill such a
Yeah.
unique musician are completely stripped and missing. Like these are very bare bones, basic like garage rock records that just are not engaging whatsoever, aside from like occasional exceptions. Like I think Gargoyle, I actually like this song quite a bit. I think this is a good song. It's probably my favorite
Mhm.
non true love song that they've done. But it's mainly just because like the little riff that repeats throughout is like, it's a kind of a cool riff.
Yeah.
And like that riff does so much heavy lifting when it comes to this song.
Yeah,
um
it feels like you're saying with it just feels like he's kind of got a hand tied behind his back on all the IOI's albums. And on one hand, it makes sense why he kind of thought that this was a good idea, because so much of what the success of Death Grips was Zach Hill being like, I am this crazy tech drummer, I need to play simpler. Like that was the whole thing, is that I need to figure out how to way to streamline my complicated knotty production in a way that's going to be more propulsive. But the reason why he needed to do that was to pair it with MC Ride and to have this electrifying combination. The problem is that the IOIs is streamlining it so much musically and then not giving you anything engaging to work with vocally. And so then you're like, okay, well, what's supposed to be grabbing my attention here? If you're stripping these songs down and making them as straightforward and kind of garagey and loose as possible, like, you need to then give us some stuff to dig into with and you just feel like all the vocals, it feels like him just kind of fucking around.
yeah, and also the like engineering too is just big step down. Like it's just the mixes are so dry on this. Like it's kind of it's both dry and very muddy. It's like dried out mud, you know. Like that's what these like albums feel like, especially Bodyguard, which just not a good record at all. Like it is like I was just shocked at how bad or how boring this record was, because I know when we were whenever I was initially preparing for this episode, I did try to listen to these records. I had to stop like halfway through because I was so bored, and like I somehow got through them all today, like thankfully, because I was like, okay, I gotta. But that's the IOYs. No records since 2017's Bodyguard. No clue if they'll ever do another record. And honestly, I hope they don't. No offense to Zach or Andy, just uh, I think doing Ginny Death, they kind of it was them kind of tapping into like a garage rock band. I feel like they kind of wanted to like take that as far as they can go with it. But what makes Ginny Death work is that you have essentially the greatest vocalist of the 21st century in terms of just someone with just pure energy. And it's like, what if you took away that vocalist and you somehow streamline this already very streamlined process even further? It just sounds amateurish. It
Yeah.
sounds like, oh, this is like, if you listen to this, like, oh, that's Zach Hill's first band. Like, oh wow, like that's actually kind of this is, I kind of hear where some of this stuff comes from. And then like, but it's like, oh no, this is actually like late period Zach Hill. Like this is some of the most recent stuff he's done. Um, but of course, IOIs dropped Bodyguard in 2017. Then we have Year of the Snitch, and it's kind of silent on all fronts for the next 2 years, besides Gmail and the Restraining Orders, which was technically an older project because that was played during the Jenny Death stuff. And
But then
but then we have the two or three most recent things that we have from the members of Death Grips in terms of music. In 2020, which we'll start off with this, Andy Moran revived his A2B2 website slash forum slash Discord slash art collective magazine online community. And in November of last year, he held an online music festival with a lot of really great artists. Let me pull up the lineup really quick, because there's a ton of great artists that were on this lineup. Let's see, you had RP Boo, you had Liturgy, you had Shushu, Machine Girl, Wharfwit, Umru, or less of 100 Gex, Alice Gas, a bunch of cool like experimental artists from across the US. I think Ariel Pink also was on this lineup pre everyone finding out he was a really big Trump guy. And you know all the proceeds for this live stream, which I think was like 12 hours long.
I was sorry,
Uh,
Matt. I just got distracted because I was trying to look up Andy Morin on Google, and I found I simply need. This is terrible podcasting for this visual medium, but I simply need to show you this picture of. We'll link this on the
is
Twitter
it?
account. The day is it? Do you know what it is? It's that. Yes, exactly.
Is it this one?
It's yes, that is exactly what it is. It's
Okay.
for those of you listening at home, it is Andy Morin. It looks like he's been replaced with a baby's head underneath his sunglasses. Is
It
the joke?
looks it looks like the
It
baby head from that Ty Segall record.
it kind of does. Oh
Um,
wow. And yeah, Andy is cool. We like Andy. Generally, like I'm interested to see what he does next. I think we can play the Dolphin remix with Payday, which is I think very cool, even though it's kind of like I don't know what context I would ever listen to this, but I think it's very cool. Is basically
yeah.
my review of it.
I was gonna play maybe some from the Night of Fire set, but there's not. You know, there's some. It's just a fun little electronics. I think there's some of his own stuff. I think is thrown in the mix, but it's like pretty standard for electronic stuff. Like it's not too bad, but it's stuff that's like it's a fun little live thing. But yeah, this Dolphin remix that he did for Payday, which I think he actually produced the original song also, or maybe like he's credited as a producer on the original song also, but um I'm gonna like disagree with Jackie on this one. I think this is great. This is like I think this is an incredible remix. Like I've listened to this a bunch of times since it's come out. Like I think the video is fantastic. Like it's the most engaging visual stuff any member of Death Grips has done in years. But
That's
I think
true.
it's because but I think it's because I think let me see who did the video for this. Uh, let's see. On Yoon, ONYUWN. But yeah, video's great. I think that the original Payday song is terrible. It is like it's like the Disney parody, maybe not Disney. It's essentially like the Sorry to Bother You parody of like SoundCloud rap. You know,
Yeah,
like it's this white 16-year-old girl. It's post Little Yachty. You know,
it's
it's
no,
post
no,
Little Yachty.
it's post Bad Baby is what it is. But
Yeah, okay. That's true. The original song, it's obnoxious, it's terrible. This like turns that into like something like menacing and terrifying, and like you feel like you're being swallowed up by like the deep web or something. It's an incredible remix. I highly recommend seeking this out if you can. Great video. Andy's doing some cool stuff with this song. Like it makes it makes his contributions to Death Grips much more clear. Because I feel like there
I
was this weird bit where everyone thought he was
yeah.
like the one who was behind like it was like Zach Hill just doing the drum stuff and and Andy doing everything else. Whereas Courage just like Andy was just sort of like the engineer more or less.
Yeah, a lot most of the synth stuff and the electronic stuff is Zach.
Yeah.
Zach is it, Andy is sort of there to wrangle him. I mean, this is all projection. We're not there in the studio. Like we
Mhm.
should always reiterate, like we don't know exactly who's doing what on every. But for the most part, it does seem like Zach comes to them with these songs and these snippets and these ideas and these experimentations, and Andy and MC Ride are the ones who simultaneously give it structure with MC Ride's vocals, and then Andy figures out how to turn it into an intelligible song. And especially with this remix, like and some of the other Andy solo stuff, you really feel like Bottomless Pit was. I mean, not Bottomless Pit. I mean, Government Plates is where Andy's hands were in the pot the most. Like all the kind of experimentation with space and the mixing and everything that's going on with that album feels like he's really like flexing his creative muscles, whereas as we've talked about, it feels like he's less involved with You're the Snitch than anything else they've done.
Yeah. I think there's a cool part of this remix coming up.
Oh yeah.
This the I
This is
again,
cool.
the song is like 4.5 minutes long, but it feels so much longer. Like, and I mean that in the highest compliment possible. Um, but then, while this Dolphin remix came out, I think just a few weeks later, fucking Danny Elfman, famous
Yes.
composer, who put out a solo record recently of like kind of experimental stuff, which is not too surprising when you know like, oh yeah, he's an Oingo Boingo and all that stuff. Um, he put out a song and he's like, hey Zach Hill, do you want to remix my song? And that's what we get with this remix of Kick Me, which came out I think back in February or like early March. um which you listen to this and then we'll get to Undo K from Hot. It makes Undo K from Hot make a bit more sense, but this feels much more in line with like the dub solo remix Gmail sort of
Yeah.
vibe, although much more of the dub solo stuff because this is all like electronic drums and uh you know basically
But
formless chaos.
but I think the dub solo, at least, like, that was kind of one note in terms of the palette he was working with. This, at least, like, it is this formless chaos, just V drumming, but there's a lot of different sonic textures and kind of environments that he's working with from the original Danny Elfman that makes it pretty cool and interesting. I agree with you. It's very much on the same level as Gmail, where it's like, this is very interesting. It's not really concrete and sort of discernible as a song, but it has lots of cool ideas.
Yeah, there's cool stuff happening here. It's cool that Danny Elfman is a fan of Death Grips and Zach Hill. Was
That's
like,
the main cool thing. Also, the artwork is cool.
yeah, it's cool, and it also it kind of helped set up the next project of Zach Hill. Uh, Basically his sort of official return to music after sort of a little hiatus with the band Undo K from Hot and their debut album GAS Get a Star,
Which
which
Robbie
what
Moncrief, Nick Reinhardt, Zach Hill
and we
trio.
yeah we were joking about this on a couple of podcasts ago, but Zach Hill, the press photo they sent out where Zach Hill has Queen's Gambit hair and just looks like he's aged like that's the thing sometimes with white people is that they will go, oh wow, like they just haven't aged at all, and then they will age like 20 years within 3 years. Like
It's not just white people. It's white
it's
people that are putting the kind of strain on their body that Zach Hill is. It's the kind of people that, like you're talking about casinos earlier. It's like he is rapidly approaching like the kind of guy you see in Las Vegas and you go like, Jesus Christ, that guy's lived a life. You can just tell by like the texture of his skin that he's been smoking Marlboro Reds for years. Like that's who we're dealing with at this point.
yeah. And just to be frank with this record is not very good. I it, you know I was in I think people have been wanting, like we mentioned Fantano throughout. I mean, people were wanting him to review this, and he did review it on his why you know review
Yes.
section. And I think he said where this is like this is what Death Grips sounds like to people who have never listened to Death Grips or like
No,
have already come in with these preconceived
he
notion
said
of like what they think Death Grips sounds like.
this is exactly what Death Grips sounds like to people who do not like Death Grips. Like, it is everything that Death Grips manages to avoid being in their main music, which is that when you're trying to make music that is intentionally not only experimental but like assaultive and abrasive, but are also trying to make it compelling at the same time, like, you risk just like, when everything is at an 11, nothing becomes at an 11. Like, you just get worn out and you get sensory deprivation, and all of a sudden you just kind of lose focus in this thing that is trying to grab you by the neck. And that's what happens with this album, more so than any Death Grips album, more so than any IOY. Like, it's just exhausting to listen to. This thing is 32 minutes, and yet it feels 3 times longer than Steroids, which is only 10 minutes shorter. Like, it feels so long. And the thing that's almost most frustrating about it is that there are some cool ideas. Like, some of the shredding from Nick Reinhardt is really cool. Some of the production is even not bad. Like, a couple of these songs have ideas, but all of the ideas are not explored to satisfying conclusions, and anytime he starts to have a good idea, he'll veer into a less good one. And just, I can't tell you how many times this album managed to both lose my attention and also like annoy me with how much it was trying to grab my attention.
Yeah, like it doesn't sound good to my it's this formless chaos that just there's no engaging song right here. It's just like, oh, it's just like Zach and his friends like, let's get in the studio, let's sort of do this stuff. It seems like, like he took the complaints from the Islewives where it's like, oh, you want some crazy shit, here's that. But it's just like, I guess I kind of would want some crazy shit, but I just want good songwriting, man. Like, that's all I want.
Yeah.
Like, I want good songwriting. This is just taking that, like, it's turning the dial. It's turning the dial up to hot, undo K from hot, turning the dial up on hot and being like, okay, I'm getting fast, I'm getting crazy, I'm getting experimental again. You guys want this, right? And it's like, no, like, I guess, but not like this.
You know what it is? It's like that one photo of the lady with like the bag of frozen produce on her head in the grocery store, and it's like, she's so crazy. What's she gonna do next? It just feels so forced. Like the aggression and the kind of danger that it's trying to, uh, and like stuff like this, like password incest, like just it, it,
Yeah,
it and I think we even talked about the vocals, which are they're fine, but as we talked about earlier with MC Riot, it's like you so need a grounding presence on these kind of instrumentals. You need something to tie you to planet Earth so that while these things are shifting and evolving, that you have something to keep your focus centered, so that way, like, that's the magic trick of Steroids, is that album should lose you in 17 different places, and it never does, because MC Ride has your attention and is commanding your attention. And the screams on here are fine, I guess, but they get lost in how fucking loud everything around them is, and it makes them feel just like, it feels like you're only screaming on this song because you know that there needs to be something on the song vocally,
yeah.
but that's it basically.
I just the fact that basically all the synth sounds, all the V drum kit sounds, it's just like buzzsaw synth noises. Just I, I I'm on Shark Tank. I'm out. Okay, I'm out.
This really, like we were saying, like, this is every preconceived idea of what Death Grips is, but isn't. This is I come in the fuck 75 symbols. like
uh, I yeah. It's folks. It's not good. Again. Stop fooling yourselves. Like, you're the snitch, sure, whatever. Cope how you feel with that record. We don't have to. You don't have to do. We don't have to do this anymore. You know.
I understand the Death Grips fan.
I get it.
They're
I get
down
it.
bad, Maddie. They're down bad,
I get it.
and
But it's just like, there is good, like that again, the Andy Moore and remix thing, like, that's fantastic. Like,
yes.
folks, they're still putting out good stuff. Recently, the most recent Death Grips news we had is two things mostly related to merchandise. The first thing is that Zach and Andy, not Zach and Andy, no, Andy and Stefan collaborated on some merch. There's A2B2 merch that Stefan helped design, and I did not buy it. It's fine, but it's nice to see that they're still, like, it's like, we haven't really heard anything from the band, and since the year the Snitch tour wrapped up in 2019. So it's nice to be like, okay, like, there's still stuff going on. And obviously I think they put out some merch recently that's just like a redesign, like just a different color version of a different piece of merch. But that's about it. I'm just looking at pictures of Andy Moore, who is a human cryptid.
I love how Andy looks different in every picture I see of Andy. He does have the sunglasses, and he had the bald look for a while, but he's just like, he's a mutant mutator. Like, he just feels like he's constantly
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun stuff. But that is that is the end of the Death Grip story for the time being. Who knows what's next? Again, there's been no signs of we're getting another Death Grips record or anything like that. Like I said, the thing with Death Grips though is that they again, literally between now and until till someone dies, there's at any moment they can strike. They can come back
Yes.
at any moment and strike again. Because there was stuff that's back in the studio, but it might have been stuff for Undo K from Hot. Who knows? But again, I have not lost hope on new Death Grips material. I've not lost hope. I think we will get another Death Grips project at some point. I just think that they did take a much needed break. I think after Year of the Snitch, I'm surprised they've not announced tour dates yet. I think because
Yeah.
everyone is fucking announcing tour dates right now, I'm kind of a bit surprised we have not heard anything on that front. But hey, maybe it's because they're working on music and they want to make sure they actually have new music to play live. But who knows? Who knows? But we're not done yet. We're not done
One
yet.
last thing.
One last thing. So of course I got my rankings out of the Death Grips albums on the Paste article. Just like a Paste magazine, Death Grips, you'll probably find my ranking of the Discog going through every mainline project. But Jackie has not gotten a chance to go through her own rankings. So let's get into
Let's
it.
do it.
Let's
These are different. They're slightly different. I knew that I would reevaluate some things, and it's hard because I think after the first one, like there are few bands that have a 2 through 8 that is as like tough to decide between as Death Grips. Like I think they're really only up there with Radiohead for me, where like if you whatever my rankings are, come back to me in 2 months, they're probably different. But here it is for now. I'm gonna go from the bottom to the top, and as I have told Maddie, no, I will not be putting Year of the Snitch any higher than number 9, but everything else on the list, we'll see. Okay. Year of the Snitch is number 9. It's the worst Death Grips album. These are, by the way, we're ranking all of the mainline Death Grips albums, separating the two halves of the Powers That Be into their own separate albums, and I'm including Steroids as an album because why not? Anyways, number 9, Year of the Snitch, definitely the worst. You can listen to that episode if you haven't. I have things that taunt me and torment me and make my and make me tie my brain in knots with that album. It's cursed. It's evil. We should leave it alone.
My fucking nose started bleeding while I was editing that episode. Like like folks, and we also all the technical problems. That album is cursed. Let's
move on.
Let's move on. Let's forget it. Let's forget about the Snitch.
Number 8. Here's where Maddie starts getting mad. Number 8 is No Love Deep Web. I'm sorry to do this, but my thing with No Love Deep Web is that it is a very, very solid album, and I think it is one of the most memorable eras of Death Grips, and all of the kind of extracurricular stuff with that album is so much of what I'm fascinated about that era of Death Grips. And it's not like it doesn't have great songs on it. Like there are a lot of like Lil Boy and No Love and Hunger Games are like some of my favorite Death Grips songs, but in general, it's one of 2 Death Grips albums, Jenny Death being the other one, which is my number 7, that I feel like they have a little bit of filler on them. Feel like they have a little more flab than the average Death Grips album, and a little more of like, this song is just on here because it's another song that we came up with during this album cycle. It doesn't feel quite as like laser focused as some of the other stuff. And I think that the most interesting new ideas that No Love Deep Web has get improved upon on further Death Grips songs and albums. So that's why it's my number 8. It is a very respectable number 8. And I would like to note that there is like a chasm of difference between No Love Deep Web at 8 and Year of the Snitch at 9. But that's my number 8. Number 7 is Jenny Death. As I said, this one's kind of the biggest bummer for me because I think I realized, even though we didn't talk about this much on that episode and I was pretty positive on the episode, like Jenny Death is good, but there's just a little bit of stuff extra that's thrown into Jenny Death that like doesn't need to be there, more so than a lot of other Death Grips albums. And I think it's just a case where the highs of Jenny Death are so high, and the lows are just kind of they're not real bad lows, but by the standards of Death Grips, it's just like it kind of lags and drags a little more than I even gave it credit for on that particular episode. And I think in general, just isn't. I had to be honest with myself, is that Bottomless Pit is number 6. It's better than Jenny Death.
Mm.
which feels feels a little. I think 6 is the right spot for Bottomless Pit, though. It's not a top 5 Death Grips album, and it's not one of the worst Death Grips albums. It's right in the middle, and I think even if it weren't for the couple of missteps that it takes, I had this theory for Matty that I ran by him, and listeners at home, you can try this. I think it's pretty foolproof. I think the way that you quote unquote fix Bottomless Pit, for me personally, is you either get rid of Hothead entirely, or you move Hothead later in the track listing, and what you do is you replace Hothead with Ring a Bell. Because as much as I love Ring a Bell and think it works pretty well where it is in the track list, if you have Ring a Bell be the second song that breaks in right after Giving Bad People Good Ideas, it starts the album on such a more hard hitting note, and I think really, really helps get you into what the strength of Bottomless Pit is, which is that middle run where they just go hit after hit after hit after hit with some of the best hooks of the Death Grips discography that aren't on the Money Store. And I think you were right that like it gets compared to Money Store most often because like clearly it's them kind of utilizing pop song structures more, and it's more of a traditional kind of album flow format. But I think it really, for me, is the level up of No Love Deep Web. Like, I think a lot of what I like about No Love Deep Web gets improved upon on Bottomless Pit, with like tracks like 80808 and Trash. I think do a lot of what No Love Deep Web is doing, but also incorporating in some of the guitar work on Jenny Death and incorporating some of these other ideas. And I just think that Bottomless Pit is an album that I can revisit in full, more so than Jenny Death or No Love Deep Web, which I think probably have better individual Death Grip songs on them. Like, I think that Turned Off is a better song than any song on Bottomless Pit, but I think the Bottomless Pit overall, it's a little more solid. The floor is a little higher on Bottomless Pit. Anyways, that's 6. Now we get into the top 5. Number 5 is Redacted on the Moon. I know it's a little low. I know it's a little low for Maddie's taste, but it's higher than it was before on my rankings.
I take that as a victory. I take it as a victory.
I honestly really wanted to put it higher, but the top 4 for me is just so solid that
Yeah.
in the top 3 especially, is that I just can't justify that. Like, there are a couple moments on Redacted on the Moon that are kind of whatever for me, and there are a couple of the strengths of it are also its weaknesses, in the same way that the strengths of Jenny Death is also its weaknesses. And if you were able to combine not just if you put Powers That Be as their own album, but if you were able to combine the strengths of Redacted on the Moon and the strengths of Jenny Death, and you hone both of them down just a little bit, I think you would have the best Death Grips album. Like, there are things that Redacted on the Moon does that no other Death Grips album does. I think it is really special in their discography for that reason. I think it's some of the best work they've done lyrically. I think the Bjork samples are fucking awesome. And in general, it's definitely one of their top tier projects. Belongs in the top 5 for sure. I will admit now it is better than Jenny Death. Number 4 is Steroids. Really wanted to get it higher.
Yeah,
really,
that was my same line of thought.
Really wanted to creep it into that top 3, but I just can't in good conscience say that it's better than Ex-Military is the problem. That is, as much as I love Steroids and think Steroids is this perfect shot of adrenaline, this perfect flow of consciousness, panic attack, this incredible assaultive experience, like, Ex-Military changed the game. Ex-Military is one of the best mixtapes of all time, and it also is Death Grips in a mode that they kind of never return to. There isn't another Death Grips project that feels like they've ever been like, okay, we're getting back to the Ex-Military thing. Partly because the whole joy of Ex-Military is, like you were talking about last week, like the fact that they are specifically choosing samples that they have no way in hell of ever clearing. It really feels like this ultimate pinnacle of like the Wild West era of music sampling on the internet, of the Dat Piff era, of like, let's take some of the most iconic pieces of music of all time and not even worry about how are we going to get this cleared so that we can make money on it, because we're just gonna, the impact it's going to have is going to be worth it. And there are so many great like mixtapes from that era that like have been lost to time because they can't be on streaming services. And now it's like if an album isn't on Spotify, it doesn't exist to a certain swath of music listeners. And so Ex-Military, you had to put Ex-Military at number 3. Couldn't quite justify putting Steroids above it, but I think Steroids is better than Redacted on the Moon. I think even though Redacted is so much more personal and there's so much more to break down in the lyrics there, I think Steroids is equally impressive in terms of the rhyme schemes and the flows and all of that stuff. But I also think Steroids is fun and like blood pumping in a way that Redacted on the Moon kind of intentionally isn't. And I think Steroids really encapsulates all of the multiple experiences you can have at Death Grips in one 22-minute burst of fury, and I think that's really cool. So Steroids 4, Ex-Military 3, number 2 is Government Plates. This is the other one that I really wanted to be like Government Plates is the best Death Grips album, and it almost is. It's so close. It's like that one commercial with the old guy with the dollar bill on the fishing line. Like, oh, you almost had it. You almost had it, Death Grips. You almost perfected your abstracted version of your sound with Government Plates. It's still an incredible fucking album. Like, go listen to that episode if you haven't. Really enjoyed that conversation we had about it. I'm going to be writing about this album soon, I believe, for the Indie Heads 2014 series, so I'll keep my thoughts brief here, but Government Plates never lost is the short of it. And number 1, of course, it's boring. It's The Money Store. It's the best one. I think that even though it feels kind of basic, I also think that the fact that it is kind of basic is the genius thing about The Money Store. Is this album should not be as ubiquitous as it is. It shouldn't be as popular, as memeable, as shareable, as perfect for the internet culture that it was born into, but it just is. It's this perfect confluence of like the time it was released, the talents behind it, this magic moment where this band happened to be signed to a major label, and they really kind of took a swing of how can we make our major label swing while also not compromising who we are. And it's the one time in their career where they were able to fully have their cake and eat it too, that they were able to exist within this larger system and do what they wanted to do within it, and make it bend to their will rather than bending to it. And the rest of their career, as much as I love everything else that they've put out, and I have such a fascination for it, the rest of their career feels like them flailing against the system for better and for worse. Like for the rest of it, they're kind of running away from their expectations of themselves. They're running away from what the critics want of them. They're running away from what record labels want of them, what concert promotion companies want of them. The rest of their career is them realizing we've become trapped by this system that we've bought into, and now we need to break free from it like a wild. Like the rest of their career is basically like a fox that gets caught in a bear trap and then has to bite through its own leg to get out. Like that is what Death Grips basically does on No Love Deep Web. And I think that we're just never going to get something like The Money Store again, because there is never going to be a band that simultaneously has the kind of experimental bona fides and fuck you attitude necessary to pull something like this off, but also the musical talent and hook writing and songwriting and catchiness. Like you need both of them, and there are so few people who can check off both of those boxes the way that Death Grips could in 2012. And that's what makes The Money Store special. And what makes Death Grip special is like what Kevin said is like, yes, they are challenging you to like this. Yes, they want to make it uncomfortable and abrasive, but it's not like this is fucking Tim Hecker, Uboa, like harsh noise music. This isn't truly experimental. It's pop music, but it's pop music reflected through the most experimental, groundbreaking prisms possible. And that's what makes it really fucking cool and one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah. Uh, Of course, obviously my rankings completely differ. Like I said, I have no. Like, here's the thing: if I were to go back and do my pace list, I'd probably move some stuff around. Like, I have like No Deep Web in the top three, and it's like, damn, I was really high on No Deep Web when I wrote this article, and I still think No Deep Web is a great record. But like, God, yeah,
You're
the
in
thing,
you're in different moods for different, like with Radiohead albums. Like
yeah,
I've almost, even though I still like doing it because ranking Radiohead albums is you're legally required to do it on the internet once a year or else you get kicked off, I guess. But it's more of a personality test / mood test than almost any other band's rankings. And Death Grips, there's a little bit of like objectivity to it because they clearly have like some creative peaks and they clearly have some stuff that is, but then again, like we've talked about, like there is someone for every Death Grips album. There is some fucking freak. There are the Year of the Snitch heads. There is someone out there who thinks Fashion Week is the best thing that they've ever done. There's
okay, Jackie. No one thinks that. No one thinks that.
someone. I guarantee.
I know.
I was listening to Fashion Week today, and I'm not gonna lie. I think I underrated it a little bit just because the problem with Fashion Week is that it's too long, and it's too long because
they had to fit the meme.
Exactly, they had to fit the meme, and so there are a couple of tracks on Jenny Death on Fashion Week that got thrown on that probably should be on the cutting room floor. But a couple of the tracks on there, like specifically Runway H, I think is a fucking banger, and a couple of others that I enjoy. But yeah, you're right that for the most part, like, but of the mainline albums, like there are some people who probably say Steroids is the best. There are definitely people who think Ex-Military is the best. Definitely people who think Redacted on the Moon is their very best. People who are Bottomless Pit truthers, Jenny Death stands, No Love Deep Web people. Like all of these people exist and are strong enough factions that Matty has to hear shit from them on the internet, namely the Year of the Snitch contingent. But I think it's true that like ranking them is somewhat arbitrary because really, besides Year of the Snitch, they all reach a really, really, really high bar of excellence and of quality control. And that was what was so magic about this run, is it wasn't just like they weren't just dumping stuff on our heads every 6 months because they were trying to keep us engaged. It's because every 6 months they had an album worth of material that was ready to come out. And when you're able to be there in time, in person, while it's happening, when a band is operating on that kind of creative frequency and that kind of a frequency of output, it's just, there's nothing else like it. It was one of the most exciting things I ever got to be a part of as a music fan on the internet, and it was very fun reliving that experience through this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, God, this was, yeah, just a fun journey. It was fun going back because before we did this series, like like after Year of the Snitch, it just that the year or so afterwards where I just didn't listen to Death Grips, I was just like, I it just completely changed the way that I felt about that band. I was like, besides being like a record or two, I was like, is this band even as good as I think they are? And this series has reaffirmed that no, yeah, they are my favorite band. One bad record. Look, there are people out there that still think that Weezer are their favorite band. That Weezer is their favorite band, despite the fact that they have put out more trash than good stuff.
I was gonna say like Jay-Z or someone like that's like a great artist with bad records, but yeah, Weezer is an even better example of someone that's like Death Grips. Death Grips would have to go a long time before they could be accused of coasting the way that Weezer has been coasting for the second half of his career. But
we digress.
Yeah.
But this is all to say that
we can't get into Rivers now.
This is all to say that Death Grips are still my favorite band of all time, and doing this series was great, and doing the Paste article was great, and it was just nice to, reignite that passion, that fire that I had for why I love this band so much, and I'm very excited for what they do next. Even though Zach Hill is, I'm very worried about what Zach Hill has to bring to the band at this point. But
yeah, Matty, honestly, like for years I've disputed your LA Brain theory, and I'm like, Matty, you wanna write off LA Brain as being responsible for all of the ills in music that you don't like, and I think Zach Hill has LA Brain, Matty. I think he really, I think that's really what it is that he went from being the no love deep web version of Zach, where he comes to LA and he's like, I am an alien on a foreign planet, I don't belong here. He's like, I guess it's not that bad. I like it.
And then 4 years
like
later,
it.
and then like 4 years later, he's in the background of a photo of Katy Perry voting. He's in a voting line in 2016.
Oh my god, I fucking forgot about that. Ugh.
Again, folks, in terms of just random Death Grips cameos, like that is one of my favorite ones. There's like the Eric Andre one, which is classic, but the Katy Perry one, because it's just it's completely just, you're like, wait, hang on a second. Like, I just imagine someone who's like following Katy Perry's Instagram being, and also being a fan of Death Grips, being like, hey, wait a second, that's Zach Hill. What? Find the Katy Perry Zach Hill photo if you can. It's very funny. But no, that is that's it. That is the end of the Death Grips Discog Breakdown series. For now, obviously, when they put out their next record, we will discuss it. We'll put out an episode. Like, yeah, I don't know if it'll be a Discog Breakdown episode per se, but whatever they've got next, we are heavily anticipating it. Even if I'm, again, very worried about what comes next from Death Grips, because while Andy's doing some cool stuff and Ride can bring it out at any minute. Hopefully whatever Zach had to get out of his system with Undo K from Hot, hopefully it's out of his system. He's back. He's got the ideas. And hopefully, for the love of God, please announce some tour dates. Please, I want to see Death Grips live. I want to see you guys live. My favorite band of all time, and the only time they came to St. Louis was when I was in high school and was not allowed to go to concerts yet, or at least not allowed to go to concerts by myself, even though I had a driver's license, or at least like I would have been fine. That's a different digression. Death Grips, please announce an LA show in the summer. In the fall. I want to see you guys live. I want to fully celebrate COVID being over by getting my shit
doing
rocked
anal
in the pit.
Doing anal in the pit.
Oh.
That's the vibes all 2021, baby. It's self-titled track on Bottomless Pit. We're gagging, drooling pools. We're fucking people in half. That's the vibe. I mean,
we're doing anal in the pit.
That is the vibe outside. Like, people are goddamn feral. It's wild. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this, listener. I had a fun time doing the Death Grips discography breakdown. Was happy to be the co-host.
Yes, but obviously, what do we have next? We've been teasing it. We've been talking about it. So when this episode goes up on the 20th on Patreon and on the 22nd for non-patrons. Next week on the 27th on Patreon and the 29th on everywhere else, we will begin the 90s Rock #1 series. To complete the trilogy of the modern rock era. Well, I guess trilogy. Yeah, basically this trilogy of #1s, focusing on the modern rock alternative songs Billboard chart. We're talking about almost every 90s #1. We've got a great series planned, ton of great guests. Gavin has
on.
You're going to be on the most. I'm just going to say this up front. I think I mentioned this on the Earthquakey People first one episode. The episode that Jackie is on, which we have two great special guests for, it will be like that's going to be the episode. That is the episode in all caps.
I will say I might be on. I think we might be doing a Q2 podcast before.
Oh yeah, well also
then.
Yeah.
So I'll probably be on that. But the next time you hear my voice, when I appear on the 90s Rock #1s, you should know, listener, I have never been more excited to do a podcast in my entire life. Not even close. And the funniest part is that the reason why I am so excited to do this episode is not even the reason why I picked it. Like I was like looking over the list and I'm like, oh, Belly, New Order, like, of course I want to do week 4. That looks like it'll be fun. And little did I know I was walking into the palace of Peter. That I was going to become Peter pilled. But we will get to Peter. I mean, that episode's gonna be 4 hours long, but
yeah. Again, our special guests, I don't even know if I think
they don't know what they're walking into. But the thing is that the guests for that episode are the perfect people to walk into it. Like, I'm so excited.
Yes. So we got a great series coming up, and hopefully you enjoyed this Death Grips Discog Breakdown. As for the future Discog Breakdown, I'm still waiting to hear back from Rose and Nat on like official dates on when stuff's going to drop, because I think like Nat's in the process of like moving, and Rose is looking for a job. So the next Discog Breakdown series, which here's the funny thing, I want to say, so we were like, basically the plan for Discog Breakdown was that Alex and Jake were going to finish the Phil Elverum series, and then that would lead into either Animal Collective or Death Grips. And when we envisioned doing this series, we thought, okay, by the time that we start the series, they'll be done doing the Phil Elverum the Phil Elverum Discog Breakdown. That didn't happen. And this is not a knock at Jake or Alex. It's like, having done this series, all right, like it's a very strong undertaking. Like, we're lucky that we stayed to a fairly consistent weekly schedule, even if we veered off slightly towards the end. But that is to say that next up in Discog Breakdown, either we'll be finishing off the Phil Elverum series, or alternatively, the Animal Collective Discog Breakdown series is in the works. And hopefully before the end of the year, you all will hear some episodes from that. But for this series, that's it. We are done. Hopefully you all enjoyed these episodes. And we'll have one little last bit of Death Grips content for the Soft Sounds newsletter. And that'll be us closing the chapter on this book. Yeah. So hopefully you all enjoyed this series, and we'll see you soon for the 90s Rock #1s. So see you guys later. Bye-bye.
No way to live off that much. Fuck what you say. Do an ass A1 when you take out first. Never did that much. But I got it first. Get the fuck out this one.